Hello everyone! Today we continue with the second podcast, and today we will basically have answers to your questions. We will go in order. Let's start, of course, with questions from the Telegram channel, and then we'll move on to YouTube. There are a lot of questions, so this podcast will be exclusively answers to your questions. Igor, hello.
Hello, hello.
So, the first question we have from our subscriber is that he suggested conducting a test for my interlocutor Igor. Let me read the question. He suggests conducting an experiment with you to test whether you can see or not. The test can be like this. He is shown 15 women of different ages. Perhaps even a photo would be suitable, about which only the number of their children and their gender are known. And the seer does not know the information, says it in advance, and we check whether it is real or not. And in general, let's touch on this topic regarding vision. And many things can, in principle, be stated and said that I am this or that, but when a person does not have the same vision, they cannot verify what you will say in this case.
Yes, it's actually a very interesting question, and I want to say right away that perhaps in the previous episode I stated it too loudly about how I learned to see, and people perceived it as if I am now a seer, I don't know, a super magician. I will say right away that my level is quite low, meaning that if you take people and observe how they grow, at first they are completely like infants. Yes, then they lie in cribs, looking at the world through these bars. Then they manage to get out of there, walk around the apartment, and only at some point are they allowed to go outside. Yes, at first holding hands, and then they can walk independently. So, my level is somewhere around the point where I crawled out of my little bed, managed to crawl to the door, looked through the crack, and that's about where I am. In other words, you shouldn't perceive me as some kind of super magician. Nevertheless, my experience is real because I have seen a lot, and these things happen to me quite spontaneously. Therefore, of course, I will not pass such a test, and I do not plan to fool anyone into thinking that I am some kind of super magician. My goal is not to surround myself with players of coolness, as many do, who assert themselves and boost their ego in this way. My main goal is to show that there is something real in this world, to inspire with my stories, to share how I got there, and of course people will be able to do it on their own. That is, I am sure that there are indeed levels of seers who can do such things. But what is most interesting is that even when you take Carlos Castaneda's books, it is said that when you first start to see, you need a certain level of visual experience. That is, you see these energies, and you need to compare them with real people, learning their real facts. Only after you understand this do you have a clear understanding that if there is such a thing in the cocoon, such a dark area, then it relates to the fact that a person, for example, a woman gave birth there, or a man's luminosity was taken away. If that's the case, it means that it is aggressive and other such things. This is only done through exposure. I have had only a few episodes of vision in my life. By the way, one happened just recently, literally a few days ago. It's very interesting to observe all of this. But unfortunately, I am not yet the kind of person who can do it just like that with a snap. Moreover, I will say that most likely you will not meet people who can do this on such podcasts for one simple reason. They will find it completely uninteresting to engage in this. And just recently I heard an interesting point, an interesting saying. It is always said that a person has a good reason to do something, and the one that actually exists. And when you asked me last time what your interest is, here, on this podcast of existence, people share something. Naturally, I gave a good reason, yes, and it may not have been entirely correct, so I will make a slight correction here now. At that time, I stated the reason that I want to invest in the human spirit, blah blah blah, wherever. Indeed, that is true. So I didn't lie about this, I really want to do it. This is the very good reason that I have received. And the real reason is that I am incredibly interested in all of this. And a similar story that we are creating together right now allows me to tune into the spirit, into the strength, and helps me maintain focus in all of this. In this, so to speak, is my so-called personal interest because I genuinely enjoy it very much. I just feel, yes, at that moment that the power draws even more attention to me, and I find it more interesting to live. Yes, things start happening to me. For example, we just started with that podcast, and I had a vision episode, which hasn't happened to me for several years now. I actually saw the cocoons, and it was interesting for me to see how music affects people. There was a specific moment when I saw the performer going in two completely different directions. And in one case, people would close themselves off, going into a protective position. They would curl up like sea anemones, starting to do so. That's the only way I can describe it. And in another, they revealed themselves, and what was happening in the moment was very interesting to observe. It was clear that when the windows were closed, people even took on defensive postures. And when it was revealed, people ran to the stage and wanted to see and watch it all. And what is most interesting, I saw this in hindsight. So at the moment when I was watching this, I only saw what we all usually see. Ordinary people, ordinary humans, so to speak, right? And then suddenly a vision opened up in my memory as I was analyzing that moment. I remembered the words from Carlos Castaneda's book, that we always see what is real. And what each of us always sees, but for some reason we choose to filter it and turn everything into a very simplified picture.
So you want to say that this is related to dreams, meaning we always dream, but we don't remember them afterward.
Very similar analogies, yes. In other words, from the moment we fall asleep to the moment we wake up, we experience one continuous dream that changes quite dynamically and transitions from one thing to another. But in fact, very few people even remember this. When you start practicing dreaming, sooner or later you reach the point where you have a few different dreams in one night, and this is one long dream that follows the movement of the assembly point. It is very interesting to understand this, to realize it at some point. And you understand that when we are in reality, we are essentially doing a handstand, performing and holding this reality with our will, with our intention, and it consumes quite a lot of energy. At some point, we lose our strength and relax a little. We allow this point of assembly to start swaying around its usual position, but not too much so that it doesn't roll too deeply. During this time, we manage to relax like, I don't know, some bats sleep hanging there like monkeys on branches, holding on with their hands like dolphins with one hemisphere, controlling the situation, taking in oxygen, while at the same time dozing off with the other. That's how we kind of relax halfway. And the dreamer, his practice is all about managing to relax even more, let go deeper, and at the same time manage to remember all of it. And this ability to remember is developed through practice. You asked me to share some practice, and there are really no effective practices. Right. One of the most powerful practices that yields truly amazing results is, of course, the practice of dreaming. And to start practicing dreaming, the first thing you need to do is to begin keeping a dream journal, without skipping days, every day. And if a person wants to learn to dream consciously, all they need is to sleep for 7 hours. When the alarm rings in 7 hours, he should have another 2 free hours ahead of him, during which he can sleep peacefully. So when he woke up, he would literally sit for 2 minutes to breathe and wake up a little, then lie back down, and after some time, set the intention to remember, first of all, the moment of falling asleep, to be aware of it, and secondly, to see a lucid dream. It's just that these 2 hours pass, and there are several attempts made, 1, 2, 3. It's best to set an alarm for about 15 minutes each time, so that if you suddenly fail, you can go back and make another attempt. After a while, 2 hours pass, and you sit down, immediately writing down everything you remember from the night, the dreams you had. And this practice usually gives any person quite powerful experiences of lucid dreaming within just 3 to 6 months. So what is a dream? It is a conscious shift of the point of assembly. Accordingly, it is training in the skill of shifting this point of assembly. Here is one of those amazing practices. So, returning to the initial question about vision, if we even take the books of Carlos Castaneda, it is said that Don Juan told Castaneda that if scientists were to take us now and try to examine and measure us with a device, it would turn out that we are all complete idiots. Yes, something like that. This is almost a quote. They wouldn't find anything of the sort. Because it cannot all be measured with instruments, and it is very difficult to reach a point where the force will genuinely be interested in showing such special effects to a large group of people. Because this is a really serious moment, and if someone manages to connect with such a powerful personal force, to the point that they start demonstrating themselves to people and proving similar things to them, then a new Jesus will emerge. And where is his place on the cross? Usually people are sent there, and no one who is sane will demonstrate themselves or prove anything to anyone, because that is simply dangerous. Even if I had true vision, I would not prove anything to anyone for any reason. But at the same time, I declare that no, I am not the greatest magician, and so on. I have episodes of vision that strongly coincide with the descriptions of Carlos Castaneda. At the same time, I am not a cool magician who is ready to lead a crowd. I am not interested in that at all.
Our subscriber asks how you overcame one of the enemies encountered on the path of the man of knowledge, specifically the enemy called clarity. As far as I remember, in the first book, the first enemy is fear, the second is clarity, the third is strength, and the fourth is old age. Our subscriber specifically asks about clarity. Please tell us about it.
Yes, that's a good question. There is indeed a description of the four enemies in Castaneda. They are fear, clarity, power, and old age, actually. Yes. And I will return to the first enemy because I have something to say about him. But regarding clarity, I will say that this is one of those traps that, firstly, are easy to identify whether a person has passed or not. It is determined as follows. If he is certain about something, yes, he says, I know for sure that it is this way. He is under the influence of an enemy called Yasnos, and Carlos Castaneda offers the path of the warrior to avoid falling into the trap of this enemy. That is, he lists 4 options for the path one can take. The path of religiosity, a fanatical path. More precisely, the path of the fanatic, then the path of the devout person, then the path of the fool, and the 4th path of the warrior. He calls it the right path if you want to follow the path of knowledge, and it is in fact very interesting. I was reflecting on this, wondering why the path of a fanatic, a devout person, blah blah, is specifically there, because he grew up, as I understand it, in a religious family. Moreover, the times when all of this took place were quite vibrant and rich in terms of people's religious lives. That is, if you look at how people behave in religion, there are so-called religious fanatics. They were told once at birth, as they were growing up, how this world is arranged from the perspective of one religion or another. And that's it. Even if scientists bring him evidence, or if some new god descends from the heavens, or if something else shows and proves that no, listen, everything is different, not as you were told, your religion, he will scream, no, I am being tempted by demons, devils, and so on, yes, but I will never change my point of view. This is, so to speak, an absolutely non-plastic neural network in a person. Next, there is a second option. This is the devout path of a person. This is someone who, for some reason, is confident that everything is as it is, but is willing to change their point of view. These people can only be switched to a different track through complex upheavals, but they still hold firmly to their point of view and the knowledge they have gained in this world. Well, fools are those who cannot sincerely accept or sincerely reject their knowledge, right? And a warrior is always in a maybe mode, isn't that so? That is, he has a kind of buffer. Any information that comes to him, he does not immediately reject or accept. He does not categorize it as a buffer called maybe.
In my opinion, he had I believe, I don't believe there.
Yes, accept it, don't accept it, discard it, don't discard it. That's how it was for him. In fact, this is a very convenient thing. It really helps in life. By the way, this is one of the most powerful techniques for life. When you communicate with someone, most people usually feel aggression if they hear a viewpoint that is opposite to their own on a particular subject. And from that moment a battle begins, a sport of sorts, yes, quite aggressive. How to get out of these traps? First of all, understand that what you know is not necessarily the truth and reality, and what a person tells you is not necessarily a lie and falsehood. This can always turn out to be true or false. Moreover, it can change in the moment. Right now, what is true and real may become false and untrue tomorrow. Therefore, there is also a book called The Master's Code. I'm not saying that this is the coolest book that everyone should read, but I liked it at the time. There are some interesting analogies. There is a chapter called The Knowledge of Not Knowing. And this is what the clarity trap is about. That is, any person who knows how not to know can pass through the clarity trap. The very knowledge indicates that everything is temporary, everything is illusory, everything can be, and everything may not be. And every time you encounter something, as long as it works in practice, as long as you can use that knowledge, it is good. As soon as this knowledge starts to compete with some real facts, and the facts begin to win while the knowledge loses, this knowledge should certainly be set aside. Again, you don't need to completely discard it, but rather set it aside. Look at the subject from another angle, and perhaps there will come times when the knowledge will return and regain its power, or maybe it will never regain it. And so, being in such a state, first of all, you will never preach. You will never gather any religious circles around you, and you will never tell people how to live correctly. because at any moment, death can catch up with you, and ultimately, all of this is one big nonsense, everything that is happening around. Therefore, you see, the knowledge of how not to know greatly helps to navigate the trap called clarity. And I will say this, I am not sure that I have passed the trap called clarity. Maybe I have, maybe I haven't. If I claim that I have passed, I am already in the trap of clarity. You understand what I mean, right?
Basically, why are there so many fans and admirers of Castaneda's work? Because he speaks about practical knowledge. If we take religion, then in religion the question of faith is the most important. And to be honest, the reason religion exists is that there is a question of faith, fundamentally, which you cannot deny or confirm. With Carlos we see practical applications, but not only with him. We can also take yoga or someone else, like Buddhists or Zen Buddhists, who also have practical applications. It's something you can try yourself and experience personally, and convey this to each other. In other words, this is essentially a scientific approach. It is very different from simply believing. And the question arises when we talk about a fanatic who defends certain truths that cannot be verified. Again, this is not entirely related to Castaneda's path, and it is very important that there is practical application for everything. If you can't verify it through your own experience, then it may not exist, or it may exist, but you really don't care about it. What difference does it make to defend these positions, to bang your head against the wall, if you can't verify it for yourself?
Yes, and even more so, I will tell you, if you have tested it and it worked for you, if after that you start to think that this is the ultimate truth, you are still trapped in clarity. Because, there is this famous experiment where pigeons were given food when they flapped their wings in the cage, right? And accordingly, at some point, they believed that they were controlling the food by waving their wing. Well, and yes, it worked in the moment. Indeed, in that moment, they somehow influenced reality and obtained food in this way. But then they stopped serving food, yet they continued to flap their wings. This indicated that they were in that phase when knowledge had ceased to work, but they still believed that it should work. And most pigeons, of course, sooner or later stop flapping their wings because not everything works. They are somewhat in touch with reality. But there are also those who continue to do this, and it remains with them forever. These are the religious fanatics of a sort. Because, I don't know, something might happen to you. You saw the human matrix, for example, yes. What is described in Castaneda's works, and you will think that you have spoken with God. And for the rest of your life, having seen her once, you will then try to prove to everyone that it was a sign for you, and that everyone should listen to you, and so on and so forth.
Well, or like voices that, yes, a person can hear at some point on a certain path, and then he will realize that these are divine voices.
Yes. I have an acquaintance who conducts readings with angels, so to speak, for people, and so I look at him, and I realize that he is in quite a serious misunderstanding about what he is dealing with. Because he has never seen them, he has a connection to some beings. Most likely some inorganic entities that provide him with information which sometimes matches and sometimes does not. But that is enough to evoke such powerful special effects in people. When you share information with a person that they could not have known, it naturally impresses them. And in principle, such things can be done by appealing to the spirit. Requests for him to lay out exactly those tarot cards that will provide the appropriate information at the moment when you are about to reveal them. And if you have a good connection with the Force, then you can really extract information in that way. I have experienced this many times. People are very impressed by this because you provide them with information that seems to have come straight from outer space, which is very interesting. Again, addressing the question of how to get through the clarity trap, it can only be done in one way. Whether you accept it or not, whether you discard it or not, always remember in the moment that any knowledge you have is temporary. That's it. As soon as you start thinking that you are somehow special, that your knowledge is the best, that's it. You are trapped in clarity.
I would probably add that here one can and should laugh at oneself more often. The sense of self-importance in this case can elevate you to such an extent that you will immediately feel like an apostle or a new messiah.
I would add here about the first enemy, which is actually fear, because here a person is asking about the second enemy, while most people do not overcome the first enemy. So how do we actually confront the enemy called fear? In short, stop clinging. Right. Just 2 words. Stop clinging. If we go into more detail, here is what is most interesting. In fact, to begin with, what is fear? Fear is the tension of the thread of will that we cling to reality with. Here they are. I have seen them in a vision. They truly emerge from the solar plexus. And what is very interesting is that they actually look like a weaving of sun rays. These are like living golden threads, super thin little webs that come out of you, and depending on how your settings fluctuate, they move like this. Or this is the binding that has disappeared with intention. In other words, it's all the same. And these threads, if they start to tense up, as if they are beginning to carry a very strong current, and they literally spasm like tentacles, then you experience fear for the most part. They tense up at the moment when you start wanting to control reality in some way, and in fact you don't really succeed at it. That is, the less you succeed, the more they tense up stronger and stronger. If we take an analogy from there, it's like you, for example, start to fall, and you suddenly try to grab onto something nearby with your hand, right? And the sharper the movement, the sharper the fall, the more jerky your movement will be, the more your muscle will spasm in order to grab hold faster. Once you latch onto something, you will latch on so tightly that it will be difficult to detach you. So, we are constantly clinging to everything with these threads of will, and Castaneda describes that a warrior knows what he is waiting for, and he knows what he is waiting for in the grand scheme of things. He awaits his will, the attainment of his will. What does it mean to find your will? It means being able not only to tense it, but also to let go when you need to. And ultimately, you conquer fear when you can voluntarily relax your will. Not only does it tense up automatically, but it can only be relaxed through one's own willpower, which is what makes it interesting. Yes, I don't know who has seen it, it's a strange example, but there is this comic Spider-Man, and there was this Dr. Octopus with these claws, in short, whose claws went crazy. That is, they obtained some kind of artificial left intelligence that went out of control and began to manage these lids. The analogy is very close. We have what is called a folk alien mind, which is referred to as flyers in the books of Carlos Castaneda, which essentially controls your life. In other words, you are already watching, like in this movie, how these tentacles do whatever comes to their mind and in essence manage the body of this Dr. Octopus by themselves. He is already done, he is in a subordinate position. This means that he does not fully control his will. As soon as a person gains control over their will, they automatically know how to relax. Relaxation allows you to follow the impulses of the spirit, the forces. Here comes the force to you. It tells you that you need to go there. The first thing that happens, as you described, is the so-called obstacle that the brain throws at us. Oh, I can't because of this, or oh, what will happen if I go? What if something happens to me? And so on, 5th, 10th. In other words, the so-called fear arises, but in reality, the force begins to pull you, and you just stubbornly cling to what you have. Because you feel extremely uncomfortable with the idea that something will happen to you that goes beyond your understanding, beyond your comfort zone, and so on. And the most interesting thing is that it exists. It pulls you onto the so-called path of the heart. What is the path of the heart? It is when impulses of the spirit come to you through the heart-centered channel, and you follow them. They are just really pulling you along. You don't resist. You aren't afraid. You trust this force so much that you can do the craziest things. It will just seem to most people that you are simply out of your mind. Why did you do that? But strangely, you will keep catching some wild luck over and over again, because for people it is unnoticed and unclear from the outside that this force is pulling you. Only you feel from within that a force is pulling you. And the most interesting thing is that the path of the heart is blocked by fear. It's real. That is, by overcoming fear, you automatically step onto the path of the heart. Once you do that, you are guided by the Spirit. That's it. That is, you give yourself to Him and say, okay, what needs to be done? And He actually tells you where to go and what to do. And He leads you to the most interesting, simply the most interesting experiences of your life. Right. And what I also saw in the comments, by the way, is that many people have a rather negative attitude towards the work of Castaneda, claiming that it is a demonic story and so on, that it's all about fear and other things, the 5th and the 10th. But in reality, it's interesting because he talked a lot about the path of the heart. And when you embark on this path of the heart, it turns out that your entire journey becomes filled with genuine, blissful feelings. But at first, the path of the heart is very frightening. Truly. In other words, fear actually signals at first that you are on the right path. But it's very difficult to overcome because as long as you don't have enough examples, it will just seem to you that some people from the outside, mostly people of course, have just fed you nonsense and made you believe in some absurdity. And this moment of victory over fear, that is, the ability to let go, trust the flow, and see what will happen, is true courage, so to speak, true bravery. Because, firstly, the initial attempts to let go and trust the flow are very similar to how a person first tries, I don't know, to fly a paraglider. At first, they catch the flow of the wind and fall, so to speak. It can hurt him. He might even break his arm or leg, because he still doesn't know how to manage in this flow at all. Here, he seemed to relax, to trust, and then suddenly he was hit, struck. And he feels even more that this is why I trusted. This whole journey of the heart is very frightening, and I will never go there again. And only the bravest, the most stubborn, and most importantly, those who, for some reason, decided to go further, despite everything, are the ones who can overcome this first barrier and learn to relax and trust the flow of energy. As soon as they do this, they experience an invasion of power, so to speak, meaning it truly captures them. This is abstractly one of the cores, yes, and from that moment on, doubts are eliminated. The person knows for sure that all of this exists, and that is when they undergo a quantum leap.
I just remembered something that is probably very vivid for me. I felt it quite recently when I went on vacation in winter to snowboard. I'm not particularly skilled at it, but once in my life it just worked out. Let me try again for the second time. I love spending active time. So, I got on the board and, of course, I forgot everything. I mean, I had a certain level of knowledge, it was there, but I forgot it all, and I had to go through it again. And here too, there is a very good analogy with acquiring knowledge, because I first needed to understand how to do it. That is, you take some material, in this case the internet, and see how it is done, and then you transfer that to practical experience. You are given assignments, they say, try it this way. You complete these assignments. You start step by step. First, you stand on this board, for example. Yes. Then you begin to move, and then you go to the slopes and try to do the same exercise there. And this is where you encounter fear. When you are in the mountains, first of all, the mountains are always, of course, mesmerizing, and many people have a fear of heights, for example. And then there's speed. For example, you start driving on a small track. Well, most of the time everyone tries to be smart. They get on the most challenging tracks and start riding without knowing anything. This happens very often, here. And when you drive, you see that you cannot control, first of all, this power. You do not have the ability to control it because you lack the skill. A few times you will bump your head, you will fall somewhere, and then you realize that you need to go back, take a step back, and roll down a gentler slope where you can at least have a little control. And this is where you take the first step in learning. You start to control this force. You are managing, and along the way you encounter some obstacles. You fall again, you see that they are carrying some unfortunate neighbor over there. He broke his leg. This is again the same fear that you are working with. But at some point, you overcome and complete one stage, and you move on to a more challenging track, where the speeds are even higher, where the maneuvering options are fewer, and you have to control your body even better. And here you will feel that fear when you have speed, you can't control it, and you suddenly fall somewhere, right? And then you stand there, and you have the option to either leave, saying that you can't do it, and go ride in that swamp over there, or to try again here, and you start again. At some point you learn to do this, you control your body, and you succeed. And you feel that overcoming of fear. You think to yourself, that's it. Now I know how. I have gained this knowledge. And there comes a moment when you are going down that slope again and something goes wrong and you fall. You return to that moment of fear. You were able to do it, but now you can't. And you need to get back on your feet, rise up and try to overcome. I clearly grasped this analogy.
Listen, the analogy is very interesting, by the way, and I really like that you come up with such things because I believe that many people experience similar things. I don't even think about them anymore. Yes, for me it feels like a non-existent thing. It's as if I'm telling everyone, yes, just don't be afraid, just go ahead. Yes, although I warned that, let's say, it's like learning to paraglide. You learn to fly, yes, but you will still fall and get your bumps. So what is interesting is that when you learn to trust in the power, what does it mean to trust in the power? She tells you, go there, I don't know where, bring that, I don't know what, something like that. If you trust her, she will never lead you astray. On the contrary, she will tell you not to take the steep road, but to go this way. If you are stubborn, if you do not master your will properly, if you cannot relax it in time and surrender to the flow of power, then you will encounter situations where, for example, you take a board and climb the steepest mountain, even though you do not know how to ride yet. Along the way you will encounter signs. People put them there. It's dangerous. You could get hurt if you don't know what you're doing. Blah blah. Yes, it's conditional. And besides human signs, the very force will also communicate if you are attentive, e.g., it will pass by a person. And just telling someone else, like, you'll get hurt, don't do it. And in some strange way, such warnings appear in your field. If you ignore them like a ram and keep going, you were warned conditionally, then you will get hurt. I generally believe that the less fear you have of power, the more you are on the path of the heart, so to speak, the safer you are. On the other hand, the more ego you have and the more you try to fight through struggle. I overcome fear. Fear does not need to be overcome. If something tells you not to go there, then don't go, right? It's really like that. That is to say, the Force communicates exactly like that. And just recently, literally a few days ago, I had an experience. So, we went to a certain place with a person, and on the way some things started happening, the equipment was breaking down, and everything began to get very tense. And it is already obvious to me that we are going to a place where we do not need to be. That's it. We have a real force that slows down as much as possible. But I'm not saying that I'm a super expert in this. We still made it. We made it just to make sure that it wasn't necessary to be there at all. Where we ended up, we really shouldn't have gone at all, and it was genuinely unpleasant there. I had to turn around and leave from there. If I had been smarter and more trusting, I would have stopped back where the signs simply confirmed this tension. Just stand. What is it? Ask yourself the question. In fact, this is always what happens in the moment. When you are on the path of the heart, all you need to do is listen to your heart channel, right? He will always guide you. If you feel a blissful sensation like euphoria, then what you are focusing on is telling you, yes, everything is fine. So you may experience physical tension in your body simply because the mind is afraid. This is unusual for it. This fear needs to be overcome. But if your heart tells you not to go there, that is something you should not try to conquer. It's like fighting, against the instinct of self-preservation. It's like you approach the edge of a cliff and everything tells you not to go there, but why? I think I'll jump. It seems like a thrill. Castaneda would actually jump from one to another when he was leaping. In the end, such idiots were already found. They were really lying there, skeletons somewhere down below with colas. Well, it's simple. They reached the point where, in their fanaticism, they decided to replicate it and hoped that if I jumped, then I would probably succeed. Something like that. For the first part of my life, the first 20 plus years, 25 years, I would like to believe in this. I thought it would be great if something like this were really possible. But I was terribly annoyed by all these leaders of sects, various religions and so on, who simply wanted to exploit everyone who came there. It was obvious to me, in some way, thank God, that these people are not interested in giving anything. They are generally interested in receiving something. Despite all these obstacles, because I started having lucid dreams at the age of 6 and encountered very interesting episodes in my life, I had some small examples that inspired me to collect these episodes, the so-called flashes of spirit. When you just see that, wow, something has happened to you, it's very hard to describe, but it's something cool. And later, when I had accumulated a sufficient amount of these bursts of spirit, I developed the ability to relax, trust the flow, and let myself unwind. That is to say, this is a very serious skill, and it can only be achieved through one thing, the awareness of one's own death. So, the death of the little things is truly the coolest practice that one can do on a daily basis. As soon as fear starts to take hold of you, or rather the tension of the thread of will, you begin to think, what if I can't do something? Oh no, what if something happens to me that I don't want? So you are trying to control reality. Just remember one simple thing. Very soon, this control will be taken away from you completely. And what is happening now is just funny. You could say that in a moment you will already be dead, right? Therefore, you can consider yourself, so to speak, already dead. And so you have nothing to worry about. You can trust calmly. That is, whatever happens, it will not be more significant. Let's say you controlled everything somehow and still died in the end, right? Or you didn't control anything and still died in the end. The outcome is the same. So, on the road, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which way you went. The only difference is that if you followed the path of your heart, then you had fun and it was cool. That's all. So there is somewhere a moment after knowledge, after experience. For example, I don't know what is really after death, but if there is a moment when you look back on your life, at least it will be enjoyable for you if you can see that you at least enjoyed life.
The death of a counselor is actually quite a complex topic, I can say from my own experience. It seems to me that we all have a shield, which in fact I mentioned one. We easily hide behind them. As long as you don't encounter death on a regular basis, you don't perceive it at all. It is endless for you. What he said, that we feel eternal, immortal, Yes. Yes, it's not there, and that's it. Even in the book, do you remember when he first showed it to him? He made Carlos see the shadow, which then gave him a chill down his spine. This specific one. And he felt something. A regular person cannot do this. They do not have the practice to feel it nearby. And again, you need to meet under certain conditions. You have to see her constantly, and even then, you develop a different kind of illusion. You get used to someone else's death. Again, you simply become insensitive. What one was talking about is a certain practice, in my opinion, that needs to be tried out and truly felt to be nearby, and to feel that chill, and then probably you will really be able to. At some point, it's impossible to stop and ask for advice. For an ordinary person like me or anyone else, this is extremely difficult. You are always shielded, you have a bunch of your own problems, and you don't even notice it. You will only realize this at the moment when it has already come, and there is nothing you can do.
Well, that's why I say it's practice. It's a kind of meditation, and many are afraid of this meditation because they find it uncomfortable to think about death at all, right? That is, they think they will hold on to their lives forever. So let me tell you this. I have been on the brink of real death twice in my life. I directly felt what it is like to understand that you have literally 1 day, 2 days, or 3 days left to live, something like that. There were 2 episodes in my life when I was sure that there was a very high probability that I would no longer be around in 2 or 3 days. Of course, it's very interesting. The very feeling quickly gives you an understanding that all this pompous know-it-all attitude of yours, let's say, everything you knew about this world, everything you tried to prove and tell people, immediately loses its meaning. In the face of death, you simply realize that if you haven't managed to live longer in some way, and you only have a few days left, then you are a fool for the most part. All your changes are worth nothing, because life is the most important story that everyone tries to support with all their might. However, despite all of this, it didn't really help me much in reality. Even when I faced death, it wasn't just a chill down my spine, it was when I was certain that I would actually die, that I would be physically destroyed. Something completely different helped. A sufficiently prolonged focus on this topic. There is a movie called Passengers. There, 2 people wake up at some point on a spaceship and, well, they are doing some nonsense, trying to lead a carefree life, while the ship is falling apart. Yes, on the way, and soon it will all come to an end for everyone. So, the analogy for me is really cool. Essentially, each of us is flying on a ship that is already falling apart, meaning that every day a piece chips off, and at some point it will completely disintegrate. Meanwhile, most of us throw parties, act as if nothing is happening, even when a robot falls from above, or another system breaks down. We just think, oh well, I'll go take some pill to not think about it and not know. Consequently, when a person treats things this way and ignores the fact that the ship is falling apart, they cannot engage in anything even remotely worthy or interesting, as if there is an eternity ahead. So, the understanding of the fact that you are in such a ship, moreover, that it will inevitably be destroyed, and that you have no chance to, so to speak, save it, leads to the realization that you start living in a completely different paradigm. You begin to place emphasis on entirely different moments in your life. And moreover, it's like, well, I've given this example many times to people who have asked me, right now, let's say, to a hypothetical person who is 30 years old. So you ask him, how long do you think it has been between where you are now and the age when you were 3 years old, for example? Everyone was hanging out there, well, 27 years, that's a lot. I mean, no, it feels like a lot. And most people, sooner or later, come to the feeling that here it is, a snap. One snap, and it's here. It's really easy to notice that you just recall a bunch of moments from your life when you were expecting something ahead. You wanted it to happen. All that impatience, wanting, and then it happens, bam, as if it just flew by, right? Very quickly. And there are many such moments that accumulate throughout life. I mean, we remember, damn, I was struggling there, and now it's so far away, it's all so far behind. And in fact, death happens in exactly the same way. That is, one click separates us from this death, and this can be considered negligible. From this logic, you come to the conclusion that, in reality, you are already, for the most part, dead. That means you have no chance of escaping, you have no chance of circumventing this rule in any way. Accordingly, as soon as you come to such an understanding, The importance disappears, it just goes to zero. Because no matter what happens, you understand that everything is happening like in a dream, as if, yes, and sooner or later, you will wake up. So, roughly speaking, you found a chest of gold in your dream and you think, wow, now I'm rich and now, I don't know, I can buy myself all the coolest toys in the world, right? Then at some point you start waking up like, damn, where's my chest? And that's it. I woke up, and all of this no longer exists. And the same thing happens here, exactly the same. And when you realize that you are dreaming, for example, in a dream, during this transformation, the first thing that happens to you is that you stop feeling any importance regarding the plot of the dream, because you understand that this is a dream. And so, in a big way, death as an advisor leads you to the feeling of the dreamlike nature of the entire world around you. That is, when you start to realize that it is all so finite, that it doesn't matter who you are here, whether you are Elon Musk launching rockets or some homeless person lying in an alley, you end up at roughly the same time. By the standards of the universe, it's really just you have a difference of a peak second between when one and the other will vanish from this world.
Well, you see, there are other problems that arise here, as we live in a society, in a civilization that does not celebrate knowledge about death. We avoid it in every possible way, starting in fact from the birth of all children. Just look, when you raise children, you always push the question of death aside in principle. When children ask the question, what is death? The adult tries to sidestep it in one way or another. And this then happens across all the institutions of life that we encounter later on. We push all of this aside, and we live as if we are eternal. And this is where we have a problem. And then later on, we should not forget the institution of the church, which states that your soul is eternal. You understand, damn it. Well, okay, if the soul is eternal, then the body is not that significant. It will change. There will be another one. Then Carlos Castaneda comes along and says that the soul and body are one, and as soon as one dies, the other will die as well. And that's it. There is no way back. And you won't have anything left afterwards, and basically none of your memories will remain, nothing will be left, you will simply dissolve. And after that, people see this path is not interesting. And here we encounter the first enemy, fear.
An interesting point was raised regarding the promises made by religious structures that you are immortal. They, in essence, hold a monopoly on death. They escort people to the other world. This is a huge business fundamentally. One of the coolest businesses, I believe. They make people serve them out of nothing, essentially by feeding them nonsense. The funny thing is that since this is a religious organization, they have taken a niche where they are not going to prove anything to anyone. Because they can't, right? There is not a single person who, let's say, has crossed this barrier, appeared after death, and shared something. There are those who claim that similar things have happened to them. There is an entire book. I read it, and I found it interesting at the time. But none of them have ever passed scientific fact-checking. Accordingly, I reflected for myself and realized that, for example, you are eternal. In something, I am almost certain that our perception, the observer within us, may possess the quality of eternity, while memory and everything related to it, what we call ourselves, may not be eternal. Yes, because I have never seen or met a single person, and it is not mentioned anywhere, that memory is carried from one incarnation to another, although I do not deny that this could be the case. Again, yes, this is the trap of clarity. Well, why not? Maybe. In the end, I am actually fine with all the options that could happen after death. Option number one, it's like, well, that's the end, there's nothing, just complete disintegration, that's it, you are conditionally gone. If that's the case, then there is no one to worry about the fact that you are dead. When you are not there, you cannot have feelings about it. If you have even something left, even one discomfort, even some, yes, even one small suffering, it means you exist actually. And that means that, okay, there is something there, so you will somehow deal with it sooner or later, that's it. It means you have a way to play around with a different story. So whatever it is, okay, you'll figure it out on the spot, the rules will be communicated to you, and you'll gradually find out about them.
Well, that's your wheel of reincarnation.
Well, in short, both options lead you to the conclusion that, okay, in one case, you won't worry because there's no one to worry about. And in the other case, okay, you'll somehow deal with it, right?
This simply leads to different consequences throughout life. It's one thing if you think that it's over there, then you will continue to live in one form or another, so you don't have to stress about it. Well, just live and let live.
Cool, and don't stress about it. You're actually coming to the same conclusion.
And the second point is the understanding that you are finite, as Carlos writes, and you must accomplish something in this life, at least take a step.
This is the wrong approach. When people start behaving like this, they begin to get tense. In the first option, as you said, it's like living without stress. This is what the death of advisors is for, to quickly relieve the tension from you, essentially. Because when you realize that you are going to be disintegrated anyway, you no longer have any importance. Well, imagine this scenario. You are falling off a cliff, right? But in that moment, while you have, let's say, a high cliff, you have 10 seconds to think, right? Are you really going to think, oh man, I totally forgot to turn off the iron there or something like that?
This is not a fact. Probably you will have enough time to think it over in 10 seconds, and the iron too.
Well, I mean, this won't bother you because you have more serious issues to deal with. You kind of realize that soon you won't have anything at all. In fact, it's a very interesting fear about fear. It is always a doubt about whether you can hold on to some part of your life. Yes, control it, whether small or large. In other words, roughly speaking, name any fear, and I will relate it to this in any case. The fear of death is fundamentally the basis, meaning you will lose your entire life. Small fears are about losing small pieces. For example, my wife might leave me, or a girlfriend or boyfriend. If it's a girl, it doesn't matter. It's like the fear of losing will control that part of life because something was liked, and there was a desire for it to continue. And fear is tension. You hold on to your will so that this piece remains. You cling to it and keep it in your life. Accordingly, the fear of dying is a fear in general. Here is your whole life. The longer you live, the more pieces are added to it, and you resemble a person to whom, stones are gradually added. When he was little, he had a few small stones in his hands, and the more he poured, the more he had, and that was it. And he carries all of this, and it becomes so heavy to bear that it starts to put a lot of strain on the body. The body ages and dies very quickly because of this, that's a fact. People who are more stressed die earlier. It's like, a Captain Obvious truth. Imagine that you are like a child. You came to Leafland, right? And there are a lot of different entertainments. Some people can go on roller coasters, others enter the fear room, and so on. So there are two options for things to do there. One option is to try to experience as many attractions as possible, to enjoy as much as you can, and to absorb a lot of experiences, so to speak. Other children, they might just stand in the middle crying and say, I won't ride on anything at all because I'm going to leave soon anyway, knowing that it will all end soon, right? So, what's the point for me? What's the point of riding on something at all? I won't be able to ride on everything anyway, right? By the way, it is written on Instagram that the only regret of the warrior is that he lives too little. He will not be able to touch everything, right? That's it. There are no more regrets in his life. Because he actually ends up in an amusement park, and what you just mentioned about the dream there, blah blah, is just a new game level that is fun to play until the end of life. But not because you have to hurry, that if you don't make it, everything will be bad, that you will die there, and you won't be able to leave the third attention, and you won't be able to achieve your immortality. This approach is preached by those who have not yet learned to work with fear, who have not realized this advisor called death. As soon as you become aware of this advisor, you stop caring about what is happening. It's real? You become like a philosopher, like Omar Khayyam, roughly. In other words, you enjoy life. At the same time, you do not turn your life into a burden. On the contrary, once you realize that it is finite, you start seeking out the attractions that provide you with the most interesting sensations and emotions. And I by no means claim that the path of Carlos Castaneda, as he described it, is the best path on earth. Well, he is definitely not the best. You probably have something better. But from what I have seen so far, he is the most impressive, the most spectacular, and brings me the most joy, at least personally for me. Because when I interact with the Force, I feel completely safe every day. This is the first thing that happens to you when you truly enter the flow of power. You lose the feeling that something bad could accidentally happen to you. You start to see manifestations of power in everything, and accordingly, you are in a state of complete trust. Even if she hits you on the head, you just start to observe what happened, why, and so on. What's most interesting, and this is a point to consider, is whether any knowledge shared in such podcasts actually contains power, and if there will be any information conveyed that truly holds strength. A simple example. Now imagine that we are, just in kindergarten, There is knowledge that contains real power. This means you take a box of matches, light it, and accordingly, you get fire, right? With it, you can do a lot of things. This is a great energy, meaning you can heat the entire surrounding environment to many thousands of degrees. Accordingly, everyone will die around and so on. This is knowledge that contains a huge amount of power. And if you go to a kindergarten and share it with the children in an open manner, you will also show them where the crab is and how to take it. That is, there is a very high probability that this will end very badly, that the entire kindergarten will most likely burn down. Either it will start to burn, it will be extinguished, but in any case, there will be damage. Accordingly, as usual, children are started to be given matches and so on. An adult approaches them and makes sure that he is not doing anything bad with these matches. The child is made to understand that matches are not toys and should not be used like that. They should only be used in this way. They are allowed to get burned once, just a little or something else. Well, it's basically like everywhere else. You get a driver's license, someone sits next to you and they say, "Here you go. This is the knowledge that gives you power, and along with it, you have the right to use that power." It's the same here. If I were to share any knowledge right now that contains real power, let's say I actually possess knowledge on how to manipulate human consciousness to make it do what you want. If I take this to the masses now and say it, it would be equivalent to if I just took and told the children, like, "Here are matches, they are lying here. Strike them."
You remember? You can recall it right away. If knowledge is passed on to you, but you lack personal strength, it means nothing. You can talk about it now, even if I take it on faith and say that you really know this, share it with everyone, and still, for the most part, it's all half-hearted because there isn't enough personal power and no one will be able to take advantage of it, so there is a protective mechanism in place.
I agree, there are certain types of knowledge that have a threshold for entry, and there are those that do not. For example, knowledge that possesses power. You tell the kids where the car keys are and you explain how to press the buttons, how to start it. That is, those who, this is an instruction. This is knowledge that possesses power. That is, if they, the children, are tall enough to reach the gas pedal, then they have enough personal power to commit the irreparable. In the case of matches, it is even simpler. Any child can do this, regardless of their size. There is knowledge that does not require great personal strength, but gives you a very powerful output, a truly powerful output. And such knowledge, you won't find it on the internet. If someone posts it, they are quickly found and silenced, simply because it is equivalent to telling children where the matches are, how to use them, and so on. It is true, although I agree, there are also those kinds of knowledge where, for example, you would tell a child how to operate an airplane, how to start it, and how to take off. Even if he somehow remembers how to do it, he won't be able to get to the plane and board it. Because there are so many obstacles along the way, he simply lacks personal strength, although there can be exceptions even here. For example, in my childhood, there was a situation when I was 6 years old. I managed to reach a helicopter factory 16 kilometers away in just my underwear and sneak onto the factory grounds to gain access to an old broken helicopter at least. Well, I mean, roughly speaking, I was half a step away from getting into a real helicopter because they usually don't even close. I mean, who would do that, right? And now, for example, I have a pilot's license, which means I can fly a plane. And accordingly, I already know that, well, they usually keep the keys right on the plane. At least in America, you don't need, so to speak, any special personal power for that. Any idiot, if you happen to tell them how to get in, what passwords to enter at the entrance, can potentially destroy a plane.
I will read a question from our viewer. The topic that we would like to address in future podcasts concerns a fundamental aspect on the path, namely the impeccability of a warrior. Here are some questions off the top of my head. How, Igor, did you understand the idea of perfection at the beginning? How do you understand it at this moment? Has your opinion on this changed over the years? How to assess one's own impeccability? How to understand if your actions are impeccable if the one who performs them or the one who evaluates them is the same person? Is the manifestation of so-called negative emotions the antithesis of perfection? Can flawless actions be immoral and unethical? Is it necessary to be flawless around the clock, 24/7, 365 days a year? Or is perfection only needed for certain special moments?
Okay, yes, good question. Well, it's very simple. At first, of course, when I first encountered the definition of perfection, it seemed to me that it meant that no one could reproach you for anything. That's it. Like, this is what perfection is. It seems like such an obvious thing, but in reality it is not. Because, especially when I started doing large-scale projects that faced millions of users, I mean, I have a few businesses, and I fully understand what it means to deal with large masses of people. And to make it so that not a single person criticizes you is basically impossible. It's generally impossible because there are too many diverse points of view, and even to do one simple thing perfectly is, well, it's unreal, impossible, and that's it. I don't know how to proceed from there. I started gradually moving towards a greater, understanding that for a warrior the starting point is himself. This means that perfection is when you cannot reproach yourself for your actions, meaning you realize that you did the best you could at that very moment when you were doing it. But there is also a trap here. There is always the temptation to say, yes, no, I did everything I could. Well, purely in theory, you could have done more, yes, and for longer.
Well, it's extremely difficult to deceive oneself, actually. I think you are right. If a person feels that they have done everything they could, given their all, then they will not doubt it. At least it's very hard to lie honestly to oneself.
I would say that this is only true if you preach honesty. If you truly always speak honestly, think honestly, and act honestly, then it is really difficult to lie to yourself. What is lying anyway? It appears when you are a child trying to cut corners, compete with fewer calories, and achieve more results. This is essentially a lie. Why is it a lie? For example, it is a path of weakness. But let strength be the truth. Where does this famous phrase come from? What is strength, brother? Strength is in the truth. Because when you truly try to do something, it often requires more energy and so on. And when you lie, you try to spend less and get more. But often you end up getting hit for it because it turns out that somewhere you underpaid or didn't give enough. To say that it's difficult to lie to oneself, I see how many people do it constantly on a daily basis, lying to themselves. And in fact, they do this from morning till evening. And you try to convince them otherwise. They will always tell you mute to themselves, I'm not lying. And it will dawn on them that they only believe in themselves through many specific situations in life.
But it's a difficult path. You just said that strength lies in truth, and in fact it's easier to be truthful. If you are honest, you don't have to defend or invent anything, you know? To maintain a theory built on lies, you expend a lot of energy. And if the truth, which is really the truth, you don't even need to spend on it, right? Maybe you invested some effort, spent physically, and that's it, and you don't care because after all, it is the truth.
Well, it doesn't always work that way. Look, let's say you go to the gym, and honestly, you have to lift. If you want to become an athlete and achieve the title of candidate for Master of Sports, you need to lift a certain weight. Let's say 120 kilos barbell. The path of truth lies in being as honest as possible, pushing your approaches to the limit, engaging in activities and so on. Sooner or later, you will come to the point where you will be able to lift that barbell. It will be a long journey, and it will take more energy and everything else. The path of deceit can be illustrated, for example, by hanging weights on a barbell as if they are actually there, so that everyone else thinks you are lifting that barbell, or asking someone else to lift it for you. In other words, roughly speaking, you need 3 years, for example, to reach a point where, let's say, you initially weigh a little and 120 kilograms is a lot for you. You will need to spend 3 years with almost daily efforts, at least 3 times a week, to get there. What you just described, getting caught up in it, filming it right, showing it there and so on, can take just a few days.
Yes, but you will attract the attention of other people later who will doubt and not believe you. You are doing all this for the sake of a long-term environment. That is the problem.
The problem isn't even that. The problem is that in the end, you won't have real strength. That's the issue. Here we come to what Castaneda also wrote about, that you either make yourself a nobody or strong, right? The amount of effort you expend is the same. It's just that in one case you gain strength, while in the other you gain weakness. With the same, let's say it has potential, but it is opposite in nature. Returning to the question of perfection, it is briefly described in Castaneda that this is the most energy efficient path. That is, every action you take requires as little energy from you as possible. That is what perfection is. And in every moment of time you have a limit to your possibility of perfection. It's like in any art. At first to, take a wheel off a car and put it back on, it will take you half a day. Then you can do it in 15 minutes using much less energy. Can we say that you were imperfect at the beginning, but became more perfect by the end? You can't, because I did the best I could. At the same time, imperfection is when you allow yourself to consciously waste energy on all sorts of nonsense along the way. Let's say If you're already aware that alcohol, cigarettes, and so on are very damaging to the body, then continuing to consume them, knowing this, would be less than perfect. If you don't know this, if you lack this information, you consume alcohol, cigarettes, you cannot be called flawless. Because at this moment you are doing what you are capable of, but you have encountered the awareness that it is bad, it really destroys you, and there you consciously begin to act imperfectly. This is usually what gets you in trouble. I noticed this, at some very interesting moments. I was in Indonesia, on the island of Bali at one point, and I was riding a motorcycle. I seated 2 people in the back, and now we are driving together, and a local cop stops us. I didn't know yet that you can't ride in threes. Well, I mean, I had done it many times in Russia, something like that. But you can't do that. He tells me you can't, and I'm thinking, well, what should I do next? You can't. Will they find me or what? He just let it all go. Go ahead, don't stop, get off and go, in short. And I thought, well, cool, now I know this. I didn't receive a punishment in the form of having my money or rights taken away. I continued to do it anyway. Well, because we had no choice, we had to move. Only I could ride the motorcycle. The other 2 people couldn't ride a motorcycle. That was it. We had no option. There was no money to take a taxi at that moment. As a result, of course, I was stopped again, and there they really grilled me. I would have been better off paying for the taxi, as they say, and there are many such examples in my life. First, I am informed of the rules. If I continue to consciously violate them, then I am punished. Accordingly, the same applies to perfection. If you consciously do everything you are capable of, you can say that you are impeccable. If at that moment, knowing that your action will lead to unnecessary energy loss, you still go ahead with it, then it is no longer impeccable.
Perfection. There was a question like this. How, in your opinion, can it be related to morality?
Perfection and morality are absolutely different things, because there are completely different types of morality.
Well, Christian principles. So here we take integrity and Christian principles.
Well, Christian principles are actually really great. If you look at the 7 sins, yes, the 7 deadly sins, and in some cases I think there are 10. I don't remember the exact number, to be honest, but I'll say this. Each of the deadly sins is about imperfection. That is, if you, for example, commit adultery, meaning you scatter your sexual energy left and right, using it unconsciously, you are committing a sin. This is not perfection. In other words, whatever you please, murders, thefts, all these moments are not flawless in terms of your energy. Because for each of them, you will experience a loss of more energy than you thought you would gain from it. That's all.
But okay, let's approach it differently and complicate the question. If this is indeed tied to morality, for example, in society, let's say you need to help someone, yes, it would be morally right to help. But in terms of energy, you expend more by helping that person. And how much easier it would be for you not to help. So where does perfection lie in this case?
Well, again, it depends on the situation. You have to consider it. First of all, if the inner voice in your heart suggests that it's better not to help, then it's better not to help, right?
But that would be immoral. It would be immoral from the perspective of society, for example, if you do not help it.
Okay, at least you'll have your head on your shoulders, let's say. It could be a trap. A woman runs out from an alley screaming for help. You run to help her and then you get caught, your wallet is taken, and maybe even worse, right? I mean, there are different kinds of situations. If a person is drowning in front of you, but you can't swim, it's understandable that you won't be able to save them. There is no universal definition that if you helped, then you are, flawless, and if you didn't help, then you are not flawless. It's all very situational, and at that moment I would focus on the signs, on the spirit, on what your heart is telling you. And perfection in this case would be to listen to your heart and do as it suggests. A simple example. So you walk down the street and homeless people ask you for money, right? From Jesus' perspective, you should always give money to everyone and help everyone. From the perspective of a warrior, you must understand that perhaps strength has brought you to this person so that they can gain the experience of rejection, and he is currently experiencing rejection, and its power overwhelms him. It sends him dozens of people, all of whom refuse, and he really needs it. Or maybe, on the contrary, it wants him to receive something that specifically leads him to you. Here, you kind of choose. I don't have a universal right to just give to everyone indiscriminately. When someone approaches me, I ask, and I immediately feel from the spirit, from the energy, whether to give him these money or not. It's not from a moral standpoint. I don't care about morality at all. If my strength says no, I just say, Sorry bro, I won't give it. That's it, that's how my strength acts through me. If I want to give internally, I can really feel the uplift to give. Then again, the forces act through me. I had a very interesting experience on this topic. I was in Nepal and approached the central stupa. I think this is what it's called, stupa. Prayer drums are walking around her. And so I was there walking with a specific intention. That is, I was walking and putting in. At that time, I had a significant financial failure and I wanted to find a way out of it. I directly turned to the force and said, listen, I understand that this is some kind of stupid ritual. I don't know this religion at all and haven't studied it much. Here this Buddhist stupa stood and I was just thinking, what should I do? What needs to be done to get out of this financial situation? I was walking and I had the intention that I didn't just want to ask. I was ready to give back to this world, to serve it, to do something useful, and as a result, to receive significant finances at my disposal. And this little drum kept spinning and spinning. This meditation took me about 15 minutes, right? And just as I was finishing up, first of all, I didn't even know if I was doing something right. Then it turned out that I had actually performed the ritual perfectly according to their religion, right? This stupa exists for that purpose, and it turns out that most people do exactly that there. I didn't know that at all, so just as I finished spinning the last drum, a beggar comes running up to me as if she just broke free. Although during all this time not a single beggar has approached me, and I was already in a state where I was almost reaching into my pocket thinking, I will give her 500 rupees, which is still a lot. Yes, for her it is significantly more than what they usually receive. And when she runs up, she immediately says, no, I don't need money. I need food for me and my child. You can buy it at the store. We just need to eat. We are going to this store together, and I think, wow, even better. Actually, she starts to approach, asking if she can take this. Some dry mixes, some powders. Well, in general, she is loading up on the most concentrated food possible. I say, yes, of course, okay. In general, she keeps adding until I can already see that I have no money left on my debit card for this. That's it. And my inner strength says, no, still, come on. Don't be stupid, let's go, in short. And I'm like, damn, how is that possible? Well, okay, I have a credit card there. Yes, there is still some money on the credit card, but it feels kind of strange to charge it for some poor thing, you know, conditionally. And still the inner strength doesn't let go. It says, come on. And I'm just like, okay, I say, keep adding, keep adding, keep adding. In the end, she filled up a whole box and I say, I can help you carry it. Well, it's really too much to carry properly. She says, yes, thank you, please carry it. And we are going through some kind of winding path. I already feel like I'm going to be harvested for organs because I'm really descending into a powerful ghetto. We come out to a huge city dump. I see 2 tents standing in the center, in one of which lives her friend, some toothless woman. Crows are flying around. I feel a powerful geopathic zone even before I start to approach it. Some people are reaching out to me from the windows, trying to touch me through some grates in this narrow corridor where we were heading to this dump. I'm just walking and thinking, well, strength can't really knock me down like that, I guess. I don't think I did anything wrong. So we are leaving. She asks, do you want to have some tea with us? I'm like, no, please, I don't want tea. And she's like, well, okay, let me walk you out. So we leave from there. And she says to me, you know, I felt this for the first time in my life. It just stops me and says, listen, thank you so much. That's it. Your path is blessed, in short. And I can really feel how each of my fingers is swelling, like from this powerful energy inside. You know, they say it's the feminine energy of yin. It is so refreshing, yet very pleasant to the touch and fulfilling. Literally, in just a few days, they will write off my debt of $350,000, just so you understand. So I just take off like a rocket after that. And the force told me, here, give this and you'll go further. Since you promised to give, go ahead and do it. What is the moral here? Well, someone might say, she tricked you. She went and returned those goods. They gave her the money back, and they have a deal with the store. Honestly, I don't care at all, because I know that, well, she was supposed to do this in the chain. The money will be passed on to someone. I don't know how this force, this spirit manages all of this. I don't want to get involved or even try to control it. If I'm told to do something, I just take action and do it, and it always turns out that I end up in the right place where I need to be. This is probably the most practical part of Carlos Castaneda's books. It simply gives you some kind of GPS in this world. You don't have to worry about anything anymore. If you want something, it's a simple rule. If you want it, just ask, go ahead. I call it, take it, go for it. So that's it. And then, as if Castaneda is throwing more at you, there are these cool attractions you can see. You can leave your body, you can walk through parallel worlds, you can meet with non-organics. You can see the future coming, you can restore your energy in such a way that you will look younger and live longer there, and so on and so forth. These are the accompanying bonuses that come to you, but at the center of it all is strength and spirit. If you are in the flow of strength and spirit, then everything is just great for you. And nothing sad that people wrote in the comments will ever happen to you. Someone wrote something like, in our series, you are two lonely warriors, bound together, rushing into infinity, and it's just a complete mess. This is a demonic story, really. If your whole life has been about how to dominate others and how to make sure you stand above everyone else, essentially becoming the ruling tyrant of this world, then perhaps you could find yourself in such a situation. Someone wrote that in this loneliness they will eventually merge into the absolute, losing all humanity, and nothing will remain for them. Do you want such a fate? It seems foolish to think that way. We also responded that it would be better to just die, as it turns out. He has no real alternatives, so it's worth trying to look at it differently. I mean, I'm interested in trying many things. I've received such information in my life that some people might feel like I'm, a patient in a mental hospital, so to speak. Well, even starting from where we live, what kind of planet this is and what is inside it, then it's all very interesting, and it's like I feel at every moment of my life as if I have just completed a tutorial in a game, right? And it's like everything is just opening up for me, and I can start doing something. And each time I move further along, realizing that no, the tutorial has just now finished, it feels like I was playing, but in reality, I'm just starting to feel like I'm beginning to play. And in this state, as if, in a childlike delight, I find myself every day. And it all started at the moment when the Spirit descended upon me. Yes, it was only when I recognized it and started to live in it, to be in a good mood, as we say in Russian, that things really started to get cool for me. After that, any expectations from the world, accusations against this world, and so on disappeared.
The question is quite complex regarding the group on the issue and how you understand your role or predisposition within it. Let's mention, if we remember, who is supposed to be in this group. Here, a person asks about an interesting character, a courier, who completes the picture of reality.
Yes, that is the party in the crowd, usually consists of a whole bunch of men and women. I'm not going to go into details right now, because to be honest, I'm afraid of making a mistake somewhere, right? But I have some idea about it. But of course, most of the people who read Castaneda always think, maybe I am a Nagual after all, right? Especially those with high self-esteem. I naturally went through such a period, and I even have certain insights on how to understand whether there is some predisposition, whether you are a Nagual or not, so to speak. Naguales usually gather large groups around them. People tend to revolve around them, because they are always energetically powerful. The shaman I started working with a long time ago once told me that I am a Nagual, which only boosted my self-esteem, something I consider unfounded. If I consider how things have happened in my life, I could gather about 10 kids from kindergarten and organize an escape from kindergarten, so to speak. There are some signs of that. With the help of vision, I did not see my structure, only what was told to me from the outside, that is what I saw. I would add here that playing the games described by Castaneda is the path of a fanatic, in my opinion, not the path of a warrior. That is, at the moment you encountered the Spirit, if it revealed the rules to you, yes, the ones that were disclosed to these parties, and the rules were revealed that you were the Nagual, you were the courier, and so on. There were specific detailed instructions given to these warriors about what they should do. I would be interested in playing with this, to see if I encountered a real Nagual who somehow revealed the rules to me in the right state of awareness, but so far I haven't met anyone like that. Moreover, I believe that part of what is described in books can very well be fictional. After all, no one has proven that everything there was super real. Just today, I was watching a guy talking about how Castaneda actually just gathered a cult around himself and so on. In other words, there are plenty of people who are criticizing him, so to speak. In this regard, what was brilliant about Castaneda is that he did not reveal his personality, and to this day, no one knows for sure what actually happened. Conditionally, anyone could pretend to be Castaneda, taking advantage of the fact that he would never come and reclaim that right.
But his books, which he wrote, for example, 3 to 4, are very different from how he supposedly behaved at the end of his life, right? That is, these are such different people, and it seems that they are so incomparable. Personally, for myself, well, I don't know if it's right or wrong. I just created some kind of filter, and to be honest, I wasn't really interested in what happened with that so-called real Castaneda, because you have a certain image of the book that guides you, and now he is much closer to you than everything that happened, leading to the creation of films, showing he had some kind of his own party, gathering women, again, some insane number.
But I will say this, after you actually experience things that are described in the books of Carlos Castaneda, you really don't care who he was. He could have been some kind of a guide. He could have really been what he was later exposed as. Yes, he could have worked in that field, or he might not have. Instead, someone else could have stepped in, thereby helping, or rather, even more strongly concealing his personal story. Yes, because if someone decided to present themselves as me at some point and said, "Remember, there was Igor, he was being pretentious and tedious, but actually it's me," I would never come forward and say that it was me. No, by no means, no, it was me, he got all the glory. I've had a lot in my life, yes, I mean, I actually reached millions of dollars, and I believe that you can't be a wizard if you're homeless, to be honest. That is, I learned this very well in my time. Personal strength is accompanied not only by the fact that you begin to see and feel the world very well and interact with the spirit, but also by how many people come under your management who trust you directly. Because there is, let's say, an impulse that comes to you personally, and you can transmit it to people who are in a close state. Well, these cascades of power pass through people with force, no matter what. So, I have encountered situations where I have millions of dollars, and I still encounter them. And I can say that not once during all this time, thank God, have I been interested in the story of going around and shouting to everyone how great I am and so on. In other words, this is not at all within my interests. And people who are really good at hiding their personal story will only be happy if someone comes in and starts doing some crazy things instead of them, because, well, that's fine. It's great that they are taking over that personal story, and it mostly helps me.
Well, in my opinion, there is also too much fuss about the Nagual rule and everything else, because ultimately we still focus on the main books, the third book, where it all talks about the loneliness of the warrior to some extent, meaning he goes like a solitary bird, which has been mentioned many times. So, I think it's important to emphasize this and not wait for someone else or to be part of a group where you must go together. You should start on your own in any case, and then, as you rightly said, you can guide others.
I'll tell you more than that. If I ever get the idea to play with something, I simply tune into the spirit, and through my connection with intention, I let it know what I would like. And in case of approval, I can be found there, in just half a day. I have never had the desire to play a game of Gual in my life, because I believe it is a kind of religious little cult. Yes, it is a form of fanaticism. Although I understand that if I become very interested in entering a third attention, and it requires the configuration described by Carlos Castaneda, I will gladly play with it. But at this stage of my life, I realize that I still need to accumulate perfection, as we discussed today, lower my ego, build up my personal strength, and so on. Because ultimately, the entire task, again from a practical perspective, of a Castaneda warrior comes down to freeing and cleansing their connection to intention from the paralyzing influence of everyday concerns. What is this about? Essentially, it's about the fact that you shouldn't have to work from morning till night just to feed yourself, and you shouldn't constantly be wiping your children's behinds and dealing with other trivial matters. That is, you should have your attention free so that you can interact with intention, because if you have a huge amount of tasks in your stack, from morning till evening, what can you do with it?
That's it, our ritual. High five, 5. I think that worked this time. All right, thank you.